Alright, let's cover this game, Baltimore and Ohio. This is another winsome game. My wife and I have been in kind of a train games kick for some reason. I'm not sure why, but this one certainly, I love train games. It's just, that's where we're kind of falling into kind of a sweet spot where I think our interests more meet. The lighter Euros, the heavier Euros I don't think either of us terribly like. The lighter Euros we end up enjoying, but we've kind of run out of new ones to look at. In the case of this, well, this sits somewhere in an interesting place. It's got some real serious 18XX type mechanisms within it. In terms of you're going to be buying shares of stock, the share value increases on a chart, not like most of the winsomes where it's just, hey, how valuable is that track? That's what maybe makes the share value have some effect. Here it has more of an XX type play to the share values, to the tracks. There are some interesting other factors to it. It is not a pure XX game by any means, but it shares a lot with it, and I think it's sort of a it certainly works better in two because it's less cutthroat. It's not supposed to hold two, but we tend to find a lot of these games work pretty well in two players. 18XX generally doesn't tend to, but these actually seem to work well, and a lot of the Euros do. Okay, in addition to the base game, I also have I got it at a kind of one of the bargain sellers online. It comes with the Baltimore and Ohio expansion set, which comes with like 4 expansions from Winsome to add to the experience of the game. I'm not going to play with those, but I will give a little bit of insight into them. I have not played with them yet. I just broke them open, actually. Okay. Let's see what we have and what's going on. First of all, we have a board of hexes, but no tiles to place on them. We're going to be using little cubes, like in a lot of the winsome games, to represent the rail tracks. We have cities which have varying values on them. Those values are going to vary based on the tech level here. We have an income track, very similar to what's usually in the winsome games, a way of tracking, hey, how much does my rail make this time? But that is not the valuation, and it's not directly linked to it. It's more just a way of keeping track of how much you're going to pay out each turn, and you do recalculate it each turn. You have a stock market track, but it's not as rich as most XX games. It's linear to begin with, but it has some nice aspects of an XX style game. And, it's more on the lines of the 1829, 1853 genre for that. We'll get to that in a little bit. You've got your rounds, market, business, same design as the XX. You've got your stocks. You're going to have a par value, but that doesn't really matter. Par value only matters in terms of setting the price. You have the idea of train obsolescence, which we'll get to. You also have these coal markers, which are an interesting, valuable option. And in the expansion, you're going to hit more options that are like that. So the way you start the game is you shuffle this deck and deal it out, and that's going to be your player orders. Now, when I play it, there's no reason not to start it out the simple way and just put them in the direction that I like to go anyway. Because I have no particular alignment as to, yes, I really want the guy in the left-hand top corner to win. There's no story behind them yet, even. Okay. So, the next thing that happens is, let's take a look. Everybody's going to get a pile of money. And in 6 players, which we're going to be playing, it's $250. Essentially, what that works out to the $1,500, I believe, no matter what. So in 2 players, handing out $750 seems to work well, and it does. Let's see what else we have here. So the game will end, and you'll just be evaluated at your stock and cash holdings when someone hits the maximum stock value here, 375, or if the tech level reaches level 6, and then we'll finish, no matter what, we finish the business rounds before the game ends. You get to run your trains out, just like in an XX if the bank runs out of money. And then you calculate out how much money each person has. Base sequence of play is first a market round, which is when you get to buy and sell stocks, and then 2 sequential business rounds, and then you get to check to see if the game ended by those rules. The market round is going to be played in order of the cards dealt out, which means you're not necessarily, there's no seating advantage in this game, right? In an XX game, quite often somebody sits on a seat which is an advantage because another guy's very active with their stocks. Well, that's not the case here, and you'll see how these cards end up distributed. It's a little different mechanism for distributing the cards as well. Okay, now you're allowed, as in an XX game, to sell as many shares as you like and buy from one company, one railroad company. And for this, you've got what arranges to be similar to your little, I don't remember what they're even called, the placemats where you keep all your pieces. Well, in an XX game, you have the same kind of thing here that'll be divided into where you keep your cubes, which are your track lays. And that's different, right? You know, here you're limited by cubes, like in a Winsome game, rather than being able to lay whatever track you like and only being limited to the tokens. You've got a treasury for your individual railroads. You've got capital equipment, the trains that your railroads bought. And then you have stock that the company holds. It can only hold its own stock, and it starts out with all of it. And then you've got stock certificates in each of the companies, and there will be, should be 2, I don't remember if this is 3. Yeah, okay, so there's 10 certificates in each company. I was playing something recently, Wooden Shoes and Iron Monsters, that had, the president of the company just holds the company charter. That's what it is, the company charter. It just holds the company charter as 2 of his shares. So in this case, running the company is a little different. Now, let's see. When you sell shares, you get the value of them. And however many you sell, you get a multiple of that value for what it is. If you're the president of the company, if you are running the company and you sell any shares, you're going to drop, you're going to drop the market value of your company. Let's say you're running the New York Central. If you sell any shares of that as the president, the market value drops by one box. In addition, you might end up losing the presidency because you've dumped it below that amount. And then you're allowed to buy as many shares as you like of one company. Now, this is real different. XX, you're spinning around the table as people are buying one certificate at a time. Not in this game. In this game, you want a company and you got first play, you can grab it all at once. Intrinsically, there's not much difference at the beginning of the game. There is a lot of difference towards the end game because somebody starting a new company in an XX game suffers a slight disadvantage due to all the stock activity that they're taking place. In this game, you're not going to see that for 2 reasons. 1, the priority is handed out differently, and 2, you don't really worry about it. You can scoop up what you like. It also means, though, that once an opportunity arises to buy out a company and take control of it, you can do it all at once. You can't be interfered with by other people. If you have the cash or the stocks that you can convert into cash to make that transfer, you can do it right away. Okay. Now, when you're the first person to buy shares in a company, you get to choose the price. And you have a limitation on it, which is based on the tech level that the game currently is at. So at the beginning of the game, you can only choose one of these 3 numbers, 55 through 66. But once you hit, say, Tech 5, you can choose only one of these 3 numbers. And that's kind of important because the companies need more cash on hand towards if they start late in the game in order to survive. Now, I'm trying to see if companies just float on one share. Not that you necessarily want to do that. I wouldn't imagine you do. I didn't see it happen. Okay. So you have an additional option. When people sell shares, they're going to go here into this orphan stocks area. If you don't want to buy certificates yourself, you can purchase them with your company and put them, you use the company's cash for it, and they end up in the held stock area for the company. And that has its advantages in terms of not diluting your money as much. Okay. So anyway, once you first buy the first stock in the company, you set up its charter, you put the shares there, you take the shares that you want it, you put the cash. All the cash that's paid for company shares goes into the railroad treasury. That's the only source of income for the railroad at this point. And then if you ended up buying more shares than the president has, the presidency shifts hands and they get the charter instead and get to run the company. Okay. If, I missed this last time I played. If at the end of the market round there's any unsold shares here, the value of the company will drop one square back. The stock value. And whenever counters move, they always go to the bottom of the stack. This is important in case there's this, because some of the ordering of play of the corporations is going to be based on that stacking. Okay, now actually doing the business round, and it looks to me like you can start with just one certificate in play. You wouldn't really want to do this. So as a player, let's say you bought one certificate of the NYC and set it at, I don't know, $66. Well, the guy next to you can buy 4 certificates of it. He gets the presidency and it has more money. And then, of course, the next guy can buy 5 certificates of it. And it just has tons and tons of money that other people have assigned to it. So in general, I feel like you want to buy 5 shares of something. You're not going to start a company unless you have the cash for 5 shares. However, this is not a game where control of the companies is as valuable as in some 18xx games. So maybe there's more willingness to throw something out there initially that you can't keep control of. Okay, in the business round, the railway order is going to simply be the highest valued stock goes first, and you work your way down through a stack, just like in an 18xx game. And when a company goes, it's allowed to do, the first thing is scrap old equipment. You see 2 prices on a choo-choo. The first is the purchase price, but the second is how much the company gets back when it dumps the equipment into the scrapped box. That's no longer available for anybody to buy. And the trains are kind of interesting in this. They're sequential. They go down in value. So you're paying less and less for a train that's going to last less, and then they jump up when they get to be a more powerful train. Okay. You must buy the top card, and it's going to cost you the amount listed there. Well, you must, if you're going to buy capital equipment, you must buy the top card, and it's going to cost you the amount that's listed in the price there. You can dispose of some trains before you buy them, and you may need to do that because, well, I think there's a limit to the number of trains that you're allowed to have. But there's an effective limit by the maintenance cost. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's a limit. You're allowed to have as many trains as you want, I guess. Okay. Now, when you buy the first train of a particular technology level, the little marker moves to that level, and that level's in effect now. And that technology level affects a number of things. For example, the number of hexes that you can build a cube in. It also is the number of railroads that can be, number of different companies that can be present in any given city. The exception to that is Chicago, which everyone can go to no matter what. And the final is the maintenance cost, the amount of money you're going to pay per train to keep them all running. If you have those trains on your company charter, you have to pay that money. Okay. If you happen to start, when a company starts, it gets its cube in its starting space. So for example, the NYC is, I believe, the green company. Well, let's take the pen as the red company. It gets a free cube here at the beginning of the game. Even if this is filled up, no, the NYC actually starts up in Albany. Even if this is filled up, the player who gets to start there gets to drop his cube there. It'll open up later. It's not like an XX game getting to put a dot that's floating out in the middle of nowhere, just an extra dot. It doesn't really change much except the access to the city temporarily. Okay. So you're allowed to build a certain number of hexes as listed here, and each hex has a price that you have to pay to build into it. Now, that cost you simply pay out as you put your cube in there. As an alternative to paying to build hexes, to build track in hexes, if you already have track, sitting in a coal hex, for example, like this, you could take your entire track laying build opportunity to take this coal counter and you would put it on your company treasury. And now that's going to increase your income for the rest of the game in a kind of nice way. Okay, there's no limit to getting to the number of railroads allowed in Chicago. There are special rules on a couple of companies. The NYC has to build track into Utica, Syracuse, Buffalo, and New York City before it's allowed to enter any other city. And the Pennsylvania must build track into Pittsburgh and Harrisburg, and it cannot build into any other city, and no one else can build into Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, or Harrisburg until it's done that. So some, little tweaks to the base game here. Then, after you lay your track and bought your trains, notice the slightly different order here. You can buy and improve your trains before you make your run. You make your run, which is determining gross income. And the way you do that is you count the numbers on all your choo-choos, and that's how many cities you can service. You don't have to worry about linking routes. When you build track, the routes are automatically going to be stretched out. They have to come out of your home city, and they just keep going. You're allowed to branch, of course, but it's like the win some other games where, the little cubes are your track, and you just play them. So, let's see. What you have to do is calculate what you make. Now, let's just set this sucker up like this. Okay, so the amount you make is going to be based on the tech level and the cities you go through. So with no trains, I would make nothing here. And it doesn't matter whether or not I have a coal counter. If I have no trains, I will make no money. But otherwise, if I had only one train, I could pick the city of my choice that I connect to and generate the income. Now let's say it's tech level 1, it'll be the first box here. What you want to kind of do is match and balance the amount of trains and the number of cities you have. Make sure that the numbers on your trains cover most, all, whatever of the cities without exceeding it by too much. That kind of balance may not be perfect all the time, but you want to stay close to that. Otherwise, you've got too much capacity in one direction or another, and you're only getting money for cities that you connect to and that you have numbers that add up and connect you. In addition, if you have any trains, so let's say I have this set up and it's tech level 1 and I have these 3 trains, well, I look here and I can collect all 3 cities, so I get 30, 40, 50, 60 bucks. Okay, if it were tech level 2, I would get 30, 40, 80 bucks. And you see the as tech level rises, all the incomes rise. If I had the coal at tech level 2, I'd get an extra 40, so I'd have a run of 120. And I'd mark that with a cube over there. Now, when you determine your net income, if your net income, I'm sorry, you don't determine your net income yet. You have 120 that you're producing, but now you have to pay your maintenance fee, which would be in tech level 1, $10 per train, at tech level 2, $20 per train. So every single train you have is going to cost you money, which is the mechanism pushing you forward so that you actually buy more trains. Unlike an XX, and why you would rust trains. Because unlike an XX train game where buying a train makes so many trains obsolete, here you're allowed to keep running those old trains. They're just going to not make as much money or eventually lose you money. An easy example, if I've got one train and I own Philadelphia, I'm making $30 in the first era, minus 10 is 20. Okay, that's nothing great, but I'm making money. If we take it to the second era, I'm making $40 minus 20 is 20. Hey, that's not so bad. Third era, $40 minus 30. Now my money's beginning to drop. And eventually, those old trains are costing you more, and it's possible to buy a lot more capacity in trains than it is to set up your rails. So quite often you want to dispose of your older trains. Get some extra cash. That extra cash is helpful anyway. All right. So if it happens that you're not making money on your company, for example, if I'm running this one train out in era 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, where it's $40 a share, $40 for the train hitting it, but my train costs $40, I am unprofitable. And what that means is if I don't make any money off my rail, it drops the price back one. Now, right now you're saying, okay, well, that's like swallowing. Not in this game. Unlike XX games, swallowing doesn't hurt your stock value in this game. But not having an income does, and that actually matches better how the stock market reacts to things. It's not just, you could sink a lot of money into further investment and then the stock looks valuable to other players, so that actually the stock price wouldn't be dropping and shouldn't be dropping. So in some ways this market mechanism works nicely. In addition, the president of the company, when it's unprofitable, has to return one of his certificates to the railroad charter. He's losing his stock holding. Now that, I'm not sure what that's supposed to indicate, because he's not getting any money for it or whatever. But it is a penalty. Make sure your railway always makes some money, because that could change who controls the company. And if no one controls the company, if no one has any certificates, the company has gone into receivership. All of its treasury goes in the bank. All of its stock goes into the held shares in the charter. The railway's capital equipment is removed from the game. Its valuation marker is dropped into the railways in receivership space. And then the railway can be restarted. Essentially, people have to refund it and start the company anew. However, its track's not ripped up. It still owns that board presence, so it could be a very, very valuable thing if somebody dumps a rail in receivership and then rebuys it, refloats it. They might get an advantage out of doing that. They might be able to buy all 10 shares where they only had 5 or maybe even less at some earlier point. Okay. Well, that's tough to engineer, because if you dump 5 of your shares into receivership and the other 5 are in other people's hands, you may not be, they're probably not going to sell it off just to help you. Okay, if the railroad is profitable, if it makes money, the president decides whether or not dividends are going to be paid out. And if dividends are paid out, Each share gives you 10% of the railroad's net income. Shares held by the corporation produce 10% for the corporation, just like in an 1830. Shares held in the, I'm sorry, not like in 1830, like in 1856, 1870. Shares sitting here in the orphan stock thing don't produce money to anyone. They pay back to the bank. If the railway has increased its net income, the amount it's producing minus any maintenance costs, then it increases its value if the dividends are paid out. If dividends aren't paid out, it won't go forward. But it won't go back either. If the net income doesn't go up, that won't go forward. It's no better of an investment than it was before. It's just producing money. That's great. It's not going to increase the share value. So, since one of the victory conditions is this 375 share value, ending conditions, in some ways, engineering the payouts so that they constantly increase becomes a goal to ending the game. You may actually want to hold off and not produce as much of a boost as you possibly can because you want to boost your share values as well as the amount of income that you're pulling in. If somehow the railway's net income drops to less than the previous round, its value decreases by one box, whether or not you pay out. And then whenever a railway runs, well, after any flips, you turn it over so that it's getting stacked in the correct order for the next turn. Then after you finish one business round, you do another one in the same kind of order. Now, after 2 business rounds, you go to the market order, and the person who has the least cash on hand gets the 1 card, the next gets the 2 card. Okay, so see, the guy who walked out of those operating rounds with the least cash, probably the least income, is the person who's going to get the first opportunity in the next turn. And that's kind of a nice catch-up mechanic that's not present in an 18XX game. 18XX games always hand it off to, the guy who did the last transaction. Well, the next guy gets the certificate, the next guy in seating order. Here you don't have that seating order penalty, and you also have this catch-up mechanism always in place. It's not necessarily the case that the guy sitting there isn't doing well. You could sit all game and do very well in an 18XX game. And then you check to see if the game is over after each 2 business rounds. If somebody's hit the highest price on the valuation, or if tech levels hit its maximum, the game will end, and you sum up your cash and stock values. And if there's a tie, it goes to the person with the lowest player turn order card. Now, what about these expansions? Because I want to take a look at them at least briefly. There are 4 in here. The first one's this main lumber expansion. All this does is adds this little lumber token up in Augusta. And that works sort of like a coal token, except instead of producing just a base of $40, it'll produce 10 times the current tech level. So it's not worth all that much early on, but it gets to be worth more than the coal does. And you obtain it in the same way. You spend an entire turn to pick it up, and now it's on your company charter and will continuously produce money. Baltimore and Ohio, Norfolk, and Western. That's going to add 2 companies. Well, what do you need those for? Well, I'm sorry, just the Norfolk and Western. This is the tech level one. The B&O starts in the game. Okay, the Norfolk and Western expansion. So that adds another set of almost the same color cubes as this other green. Yeah, it's pretty determinable. And a new stock certificates, etc. And what that's going to do is it starts a new company. Now, this is perhaps the most annoying of the expansions from my uninformed view, because it adds a bunch of coal chips to the game, which, if I can find them, here they are. It adds these Norfolk and Western coal chips, which it looks to me... Oh, I lost a coal chip already. I mean, it was there before. Here it is. They just mirror the old coal chips because the Norfolk and Western really took over coal production at one point, or coal hauling at one point. The N&W never gets income from cities. It only services coal mines. It is the only company that can take its special coal markers. It immediately takes them. It doesn't have to spend a track lay to do so. They pay 10 times the tech level. And it's based on your capital equipment, unlike normal coal. So tech level 4 capital equipment will service 4 coal counters. Tech level 5 or higher is needed to get all 5. This company doesn't even become available until tech level 4. Now again, I'm not going to play with these expansions, and this one is probably the most of a reason why I'm not going to do it. I just do not like where it goes, and I think all we're doing is going to be expanding the game, extending the game really. I haven't played this enough to really feel the need to throw more expansions into it, and I'm pretty happy with how it plays. The Tech Level 7 expansion, that's going to add some more trains, another layer. We actually have, this is the Tech 7 expansion, additional costs, more chart pieces here. I'm dripping sweat because a new level to restart things in receivership from if you're in Tech Level 7, and well, stuff for the N&W. Boosts in income, what cities get boosted. Basically a bunch of little modifiers for that 7th game turn, and now the game, instead of ending at the end of the 375 or Tech 6, ends at Tech 7 or 375. Oh, I left a game end condition here out of it. See, this ends if all players own, if all the stock has been bought. And that is not in here. Yeah, so they added another victory condition, which is everybody's bought all the stock up. If there are no more shares left, we just end the game there, rather than letting the person who bought that extra productive capability to run it for an extra turn. No, that screws the pooch, and the game's over there instead. Okay, the final one is this Robber Barons expansion, which is a bunch of these cards. And what's going to happen, they, I guess, get randomized. Starting on the 2nd marketing round, 1 is auctioned per turn. And instead of buying or selling shares, you can select a Robber Baron card and put it up for auction. Everybody has to bid in at least $1 increments. These give you extra bucks in your hand. They're like little private companies that slowly enter the game in an XX terminology. So this, $1 for every hex with a railroad in it. $9 per railroad that makes it to Chicago. $11 for every coal counter taken. They're interesting. I could see them adding a little bit of flavor, a little bit of variety to the game. But again, I have not played this enough to need to mix it up. I'm glad to have those expansions because maybe after I play this 4 or 5 times, I'll want them. But as of right now, I don't terribly. Well, I spent a lot of time going through that introduction. Someone else, bored to death, has given a very, very good, at least, overview of the game. So that's not what I want to do. And part of it is I want to think about things. I want to also remind myself of the rules. And no better way to do that than to waste your time with it, right? All right, up this goes.